Well, here's that Grunow chassis sitting on the table all by itself before I install it. It's a beastly thing. It's quite heavy. It's a beautiful, beautiful radio. It has a monstrous transformer. You know, one of the problems I like Zenith black dials a lot, but one of the problems with Zenith radios is that their transformers were frequently undersized, and so that combined with a rectifier tube that's of questionable reputation has caused a lot of Zenith transformers to fail prematurely. But boy, I'll tell you something. This transformer, this iron on this Grunow is not going to fail. This is a big beefy thing. It's a really nice chassis. It was a lot of work to do because it has a high frequency channel and a low frequency channel. So it's not stereo, but basically has two output channels, which meant a lot more capacitors, coupling capacitors and bias capacitors and things like that that had to be replaced. So it was for the tube count. It was even for the high tube count that it has, there were a lot more capacitors to install than you might expect. So this radio, let's go through them and count them. So you can see that there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. This is a big 15 tube radio, and it has a really neat tuning dial, tuning mechanism. This is what a teledial tuning mechanism looks like from the backside. And what you see here are all of the various lights for each channel that you select, or each band that you select. A different light lights up. And of course, the main dial lights are toward the center, but otherwise, the band lights light up separately as you select the various bands with the band switch. It has three IF stages, and you can see there's the first, the second, and the third IF transformers. And obviously, with that many, it's got an RF stage as well. So the three gain capacitor tuning condenser, push pull output, push pull. So the two 6F6s for the push pull low frequency output, and then there's a 6F6 for the high frequency output. So pretty cool. It also has automatic frequency control, which means it has a discriminator. It uses a discriminator similar to what FM is, in a similar circuit to what's used in early FM stuff, and that discriminator helps. It compares basically two voltages to determine if there's a difference in voltages. It's not on a frequency, and it adjusts frequency until it gets there. I haven't really studied the circuit much yet, and I'm not an expert in that particular area, so I have a basic understanding, but it does use a discriminator to help with the automatic frequency control. It's obviously it has two speaker plugs for the for the high frequency and for the low frequency. The dial is a pretty neat arrangement, and I'll show you the teledial portion in a minute. This is the dial escutcheon for the teledial. Unfortunately, when the owner was bringing this radio back to me, you can see right there, you see a crack. Well, that crack wasn't there until yesterday afternoon when the owner was bringing this back to me to install the chassis in the cabinet and dropped the dial. It's not a big deal. I went to dialcover.com, and Mark is making me a nice plastic dial. It's a 6 3/4 inch diameter, and he's making me a 6 3/4 inch diameter. And his prices are good, and he's fast, and he's polite to work with. The guy, he's just great. So dialcover.com, that's Mark. And he does a nice job for me. Now, the way this works, it's a really neat dial arrangement, different than other radios I've seen. I'll do a little tuning here just to show you. Now, I'll show you this. You'll probably have seen this in the, uh, the demonstration portion of these videos. But this uses this whole wheel turns, and you can see there's the coarse tuning. To do fine tuning, you push the knob in, and it will do. Now it turns much slower, and it's kind of a neat ball bearing arrangement, and it has a little finger that grabs for the coarse tuning, grabs that sawtooth disc at the back, and that does the coarse tuning. It kind of locks it in for coarse. But when you're doing fine tuning, it works a lot like a Philco knob or a Philco tuning mechanism. You push it in, and the ball bearings engage and turns at a different rate. Now, the way the teledial works is kind of different. I'm sure some of the Philcos are a little similar to this. You push the knob in, and you turn it. You turn this until that button engages. There's a stop back behind the dial, and that sets you in the station. Now, the automatic frequency control will maintain on that station, but you have to turn the automatic frequency control on after you've selected the station. That's how it works. And so when you push this in, there's a big contact that goes all the way around, basically a strip. This opens up the contacts so you don't hear the stations as you're moving this. And so you push it till it stops and you're good to go. Push it till it stops and you're good to go. Now these things want to pop out. That won't be the case when I have the escutcheon on, because the escutcheon basically has stops on it that keeps these knobs from popping out. So it's pretty neat, pretty ingenious design. There are instructions on this thing that show you how to set the knobs in place for setting your tuning. It's pretty cool. And so that is what the chassis looks like. And I'm going to demonstrate, I'll have a demonstration video. You might have seen it before you saw this part. I think that's how I'm going to edit the thing, is set this part last. But it's a nice radio, nice clean design. Was a real challenge to work on. There was an awful lot of work to do on it. And it took a lot of time to get through all the capacitors. So let's take a look real quick. Pretty bad film technique, I know, but there's a real quick look under the chassis. Not a restuffing job, just too darn many capacitors to do the restuffing, and the customer would not want to have paid for all of that. There's a couple of terminal strips in there loaded up with resistors and so forth. More capacitors, as I mentioned, due to the fact that there are two major audio output channels. But really well-made radio. You can see some shielding around the RF and oscillator sections. They did a nice job of making this radio play quietly without a lot of noise. I usually leave my handwritten notes under the chassis, because the next guy that works on this radio might find them useful. So there you go. There's Grunow model 1561, which is a take on the 1541. And that's it for this part of the demo.